Mhm.
Basically,
We don't have to do this right. We don't have to do it correctly.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so I think it's working. Um, okay, okay. Yeah, but basically, usually they tell like a welcome, Mark.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's great to be here.
yeah. So we
I'm
were
looking
talking. Yeah, we were talking about like recent elections, right?
hmm Yeah,
And like I'm streaming from Moscow, Russia, and you're like in Midwest, right?
I'm in the Midwest of the USA. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And we,
In a blue metropolitan area in a red state
oh, oh, oh. So your city, what is blue, right?
of St. Louis.
St. Louis.
St.
Yeah.
Louis, Missouri is much more cosmopolitan and therefore more progressive.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and Actually, the Black Lives Matter movement originated in a St. Louis suburb
Mm-hmm.
in Ferguson, Missouri.
Interesting. I didn't know it.
Yeah,
It's
yeah. A year or so before the big blow up in Minneapolis.
it's interesting that like we talked about previously, polarization and how it's like basically these agglomerations, big cities voted like for blue, right, for Harris, and like countryside, right, more like for Trump. And I see kind of well, we don't have like elections, but how people think, like in Russia, it's kind of similar. So we have like this Moscow, huge city,
Mhm.
like 20 or 25 million, I think, people, like on all this agglomeration. And
Mhm.
it's kind of everybody says that Moscow, it's not Russia, because
I
like
would, yeah,
it's kind of same like polarization, because people live a completely different life, right, in
yeah.
this other smaller cities, on countryside, like in Siberia, and so it's like, yeah, it's interesting how like this centralization and everybody living in this how say huge buildings with like 20 floors and so on, and how it's like affects like minds of people compared to when you're living like in your own house.
And yeah, it's very, it can be seen here in the United States when as very much a rural versus urban polarity. The the thing that is so interesting to me is that people, for one thing, there's a type of freedom and invisibility in an urban area because there's so many people, they don't know each other.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody knows what the other person is really thinking, feeling, pursuing in their life or hiding.
Yeah.
And so there's an odd type of freedom in that congestion that's not available if you're in a small town because you're too visible to each other.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting
And
because like in cities, I remember like I visited US like 10 years ago, like Boston, Massachusetts,
Mhm.
and then like for kind of vacation from studies, from studying English for 1 week, Manhattan in New York. And it was curious, like on Boston, like a subway. how people sometimes say like hi, or like they like wave, or how is it, like smile, and compared to, for example, Moscow subway, where people more like guarded, more
Mhm.
uh, like sitting in their phones or books, and
Mhm.
and this one, right, like this difference, like cultural. And another one, yeah, like you're saying, for example, when you're going to some kind of village, like everybody saying hi, or like children, elders, and so on, and looking in your eyes. Whereas like here in big city, nobody like looking at each other, like when somebody's saying something like hi or some, it's like strange. For
Mhm.
example, on workout, we have like these workouts areas where you can do like pull-ups and dips,
Mhm.
all this kind of stuff outdoors, like in a
Yeah.
park, and
Mhm.
like each left to their own devices, like I don't know, listening to something or like texting, and
Yeah.
whereas like in these areas, because like I'm sometimes visiting like summer house, like in Moscow area, like to 200 kilometers from Moscow, uh, uh, people really like talk. There's like some kind of connection.
Yeah.
Yeah. How it's like in US? It's like, is it like similar or what?
Yeah. Yeah, it's quite similar. Different cities have different histories, and so there, like you saw between Boston and Manhattan, there was some qualitative difference to how people interacted. But in general, um, if I'm driving down a rural road
Mm-hmm.
in the U.S., and I don't have to go very far from St. Louis area because St. Louis is only the metropolitan area. The agglomeration is only about 2.5 million.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have to go very far to be in the country, as we would say. And if I'm on a small road somewhere, a 2-lane road in a rural area, typically when driving along, a hand is on the near the top of the steering wheel, and people just kind of wave to each other as you pass, whether they know you or not. And if you know that's what's done, you can wave and they'll wave back, even though they don't recognize your vehicle. They go, well, but they're okay. And it's and people will just be slow in checkout lanes at the store because they get into a little conversation with somebody.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
And there's it, in the city, there's a lot of separation and there's a lot of isolation, but there's a lot of, as I was saying earlier, there's a lot of freedom of action and thought.
Mm-hmm.
Where in a small town, you're observed more. If you live there, you're observed, and um, the expectations about how life unfolds in that little area, there's a form of enforcement of those norms,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and you can't escape as well the enforcement
Yeah, it's like
because.
relations with neighbors, right? And not only
Mhm.
that, I think for me personally, like when I'm like this in countrysides, I'm more attuned to nature, like my
Mhm.
biorhythms. So in the city, I can doing something on my PC, or like some watching, and but in countrysides it's more like relaxed, and it's getting dark, right? Eerily, there no artificial light, so
Hmm.
it's kind of you're doing like more slow, and you're more attuned to this slow like walk of life. You see like change of seasons, like
Hmm.
they're like autumn, and so like winter, more like snow, stars. You can see stars because there are no like light pollution, right?
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
in the city, you can basically, you don't need even like to walk out. For example,
No.
there's delivery services, like everything. And like in Japan it's like a kind of a future, but we have similar like in Moscow. You don't need to get out. So like people even like forget how to communicate, like have
Right.
small talk. It's like on court, like on elevator. And it's different.
Hmm.
I remember Nora said that in Sweden it's kind of I think rude to talk, right? I remember she said when she
Hmm.
and like American came to Sweden, like wanted to do some small talk. Uh, there's this, yeah, like stare
Yeah.
or something.
Hmm. Yeah. The yeah, because we're talking, I think, about two or three different phenomena. The urban rural phenomena, or contrast, is probably can be applied to most places on Earth that have that have been urbanized and still have rural areas. So there's this general similarity of difference, but then you overlay whatever the cultural history of the place is. Um, I have a I have a friend. I haven't talked to him for a while, but Uh, his parents immigrated from Moldova maybe
Mm-hmm.
in the late '80s, before when it was still part of the Eastern Bloc, and when it still and and he talked about how guarded his parents are.
Mm-hmm.
Still, I mean, his family is still very very guarded, as a legacy of the degree of surveillance that was
Yeah,
present in the Soviet Union, and and
yeah,
the
because
not unusual experience of your neighbors
yeah,
reporting you for something, and so they're
mm,
and that guardedness still persists. And you were talking about, in my kind of um, and and that's not a cultural legacy that exists in the U.S.
mm-hmm. Yeah,
We can be guarded for other reasons, but there's not like a systemic fear of speaking your mind.
yeah. You haven't have like this experience that like my grandparents and so on,
Hmm.
where like the idea it was like stronger than family ties for a lot of
Yeah.
people, when everybody was like building this communism, like kind of
Hmm.
version of this. And
Right.
in order to do that, like you need like to separate yourself from the family. So it's like values, it's higher order than family values, because family values, it's like old news. It's like a
Hmm.
white army, it's a
Right.
king, Tsar.
Hmm.
So no, 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 we are doing another thing, because uh, yeah, I think it's basic for like all kind of mass, um, like Eric Hoffer book. He talks
Right.
about like these mass movements,
Hmm.
where you need like to basically like in fact with this meme, right, a new like mass movement with ideas, and
Yeah,
old memes, like ideas that there's like values of
you,
family,
you,
of
you have to eradicate the
yes,
previous mimetic structure.
yes, yes.
And um, and that's a great transition in our conversation, because that is what much of America feels is happening with the very, very progressive forms and the cancel culture
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
and the degree of actual the degree of censorship during the COVID era that was imposed upon media in the United States. Many, many Americans find that very, very disturbing and very similar to what you're talking about in people intent on building this new framework of belief and value.
utopia.
Uh, yeah, a utopian urge.
Yeah,
Um, and to date, none of those have turned out very well.
yeah, yeah. It's it's I thought, it's like you want to build utopia, but you're doing it by wrong method, by wrong actions. So it's
Mhm.
like a law, kind of like a law by law, or like good by good. So you can't build something by completely opposite. Like for
Correct.
censoring, for like
Correct.
censoring speech, some another like opinions, which this country was built, right? uh,
Yeah.
like you, okay, so I am smarter than you, you're like stupid, you don't understand, I know, okay, it's like some
Yeah.
medicine, and you just
Yeah.
listen, and you're like, it's like, like relations with like these media corporations, like they're like father or like mother figures, and we're like
Hmm.
children.
Yes.
And
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, it's interesting how it's like interconnected with this like kind of interests of companies, on some companies, or like of military industrial complex, and like some vested interests. And I just don't understand like how people like kind of left wing, there be kind of who basically, from what I understood, from 60s or 70s, where this was LSD, and hippies, like anti-war
Hmm.
movement, like kind of anti-government, and how they're now like in the structure, like in
Well, I was, well, yeah, I graduated high school in 1967
mm,
because I was born in 49. And, and I was something, I was an amateur hippie,
mm,
but I ended up being subject to being drafted and being sent to Vietnam. And so I managed to volunteer and was able to get in in the Air Force for four
mm,
years. Um, I was in Vietnam for a very short time, just on a temporary assignment,
mhm,
uh, and I was what the Air Force trained me for was I was fixing and repairing and installing and maintaining early uh, digital encryption systems.
mhm. Interesting.
And this was before integrated circuits. I mean, these were. I mean, you know the design of a flip flop, right?
Uh,
As an engineer, one flip flop is a bistable digital, one or zero
oh yeah,
state
yeah, yeah, yeah.
circuit.
Okay.
Yeah, it's two transistors or two gates and a bunch of related capacitors and resistors.
Mm-hmm.
When I was working on machines, um, it was two transistors,
Mm.
physical cans, the
Mm-hmm.
little metal, top hat, kind of transistor devices and separate capacitors and circuits. It was not miniaturized any further than that. And so these were very large devices. I mean, they were cabinets that now just take up, a micro, just a
Yeah, yeah.
minuscule area in a cell phone.
Interesting. You
Um,
said that in Air Force, I heard this conspiracy theory that's like one of the uh, like proper how to say, like this influenced like this war, like Bell helicopters or something. Like Bell helicopters.
yeah,
Yeah, because like
they
there's
were a big
Kennedy
helicopter
was,
builder.
yeah, Kennedy was like
Yeah.
against war and against
Hmm.
like this Cuban crisis. Then like okay, he was like assassinated. His brother, right, Robert,
Yep.
too. Like it's
Yes.
how it's happened. Nobody knows still this day.
Well, there are people who know.
Yes, and then like okay, we are going to war, like to this
Hmm.
Vietnam. Like I forget
Yeah.
who like happened to be president. He was like a vice president of like Kennedy, like this guy Johnson or something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the
Well, the the situation, yeah, this is going back into some older history. Um, the Vietnam situation here, when when World War II ended, the United States found themselves in a unique situation as being the only industrial nation whose industry wasn't bombed
yeah,
to dust.
in profit.
And yeah, and at the time, it was kind of a unique time in history because the U.S. was like, well, gee, there was World War One, and the Versailles Treaty really messed that up.
Yeah, yeah.
And this whole idea of reparations, having the loser pay the winner, um, the U.S. was like, well, that doesn't work out so well. Maybe we should do something different.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was this, the U.S. basically was rolling in oil. The
Mm-hmm.
world was, the net energy in the world was immense. I mean, one barrel of oil and you get back 80 to 100, you
Mm-hmm.
know, I mean, ungodly wealth
Mm-hmm.
and for doing work. So what we had the luxury of doing was rebuilding our former enemies to make them our friends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We rebuilt Japan, we rebuilt Germany, helped with most of Europe, um, did um, a lot of that changed the trajectory of the future in a better way. But um, but as part of that, the Marshall Plan for Europe relied upon the European colonial powers regaining control of their colonies
Mm-hmm.
to get the resources and economic advantage to help leverage their rebuilding. Because during the war they'd lost track, and actually there were wars in some proxy wars in some of the colonies between the Axis and the Western Allies.
Mm-hmm.
So the U.S. was all about helping the European countries get get back in control of their colonies. And the funny thing was there was this guy in this nationalist in Vietnam called Ho Chi Minh.
Mm-hmm.
Because Japan had actually occupied Vietnam all the way down into Singapore. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they had occupied. so China,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Laos, Cambodia, and he had been part of the resistance and worked with us and Britain in helping defeat the Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
And all he wanted was for the French not to come back into Vietnam.
Interesting.
And and the people who worked with him, the U.S. military people who worked in conjunction and they worked together against the Japanese during the war, they were in favor of that, but it was in conflict with rebuilding Europe.
Hmm.
And so the U.S. supported France trying to get back in control of this nation that didn't want them any longer and had a reasonably effective military ability to resist it. And so, actually, it was 1954 or 1956 when when his rebellious group, who had turned to Russia for help because the United States didn't want to help him,
Yeah.
he was kind of on a line. He was a nationalist basically, but because we wouldn't help him, he turned to Russia, and they helped him, and he defeated the French and threw them out.
Mm-hmm.
And so then there was this power vacuum.
Yeah.
There was this non-colonial, non-Western presence in this part of the world. They had offshore oil and resources, and so the United States ended up as part of the Cold War that was being waged by both sides, but really vigorously by the United States and Britain.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it became a real strategic location, and our involvement began around the time the French were losing control, and it just accelerated, and we were already supporting. I mean, we'd done regime change there too,
Mm-hmm.
just before at the end of Nixon's or of Eisenhower's presidency. We actually switched, put a different government in Vietnam that we could control better. And by the time Kennedy, who was anti-colonial,
Mm-hmm.
because he was Irish,
Mm.
and the Irish have got a very bad taste in their mouth about the 700 years that the British ruled them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I say, Ireland was Britain's first colony,
Yeah.
and and they figured out how to be a colonial power. They experimented with Ireland, and
Yeah.
and and so Kennedy was very anti-colonial, and anti the CIA, because he knew the CIA had already overthrown a bunch of people and were just doing all kinds of crazy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And those are a couple of things that probably got him killed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's
And
interesting.
then Johnson, you know, you know, um, and then Johnson became
Yeah.
president, and then the Gulf of Tonkin, the false flag event, where North Vietnam
Yeah.
attacked one of our ships in the Gulf of Tonkin.
Yeah.
So we have to, so now we have a big excuse. We have to go back and teach them a lesson, and that was the big gateway to really going in big. But it was staged. I mean, it was we were in their waters. We
Yeah.
weren't in international waters. It was a false flag event that we provoked it.
Yeah. There's like lots of false flags. Yeah. Sorry. So
Mm.
basically, what's interesting? You talked about the Treaty of Versailles, right? And
Hmm.
have you read Gregory Bateson's article on that?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, it's kind
yeah,
of mind changing. How
yeah.
he described it.
Well, that was the kind of the perpetual model of conflict in Europe. Was somehow a war would start over resources. Typically, I don't know how many times the Alsace Valley in between France and Germany has changed hands
Yeah.
over the centuries. Um, but then the winner always extracts tribute from the loser, and the resentment cycle just continues.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like introduced this kind of how to say, like logic, like war logic, like strategy. There's like this author, like book I have, Edward Ludwig. He is like writing on strategy. He was like advisor
Mm-hmm.
to some American president, Reagan, I think. Yeah, Reagan. And basically, there's like peace and war, right? And in war, you can use everything, like trick enemy, like this paradoxical logic,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And but when there's like context of peace, okay, we are dealing, we'll try to be like truthful, right? How it was like in old ways, where so like some,
Always, yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
and like Bateson like laying out this hypothesis that after like Alice tricked Germany, right,
Mm-hmm.
into this kind of peace deal, which was like complete bullshit, and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it started like this. And I think he lays out that because of that, basically, U.S. bombed Japan with nuclear bombs because they like, okay, if we tricked them, so there's can't be like truth. There's only like obliteration, like I mean like only force, only power. So you need like completely dominate Japan, like to
Yeah.
smithens, or how say, like destroy it. And they're, because they can trick, like we tricked Germany, they can trick and they attack, so we need only so there's no, how say, now it's like very hard to get some kind of common ground deal, because everybody thinks they like we are how say, like our mental models kind of was built upon like this treaty, right? Kind of like so you can like trick about like Japan and other stuff, and now there can't there's no like deal on like wars like with Ukraine and with Israel, because it's like all this war mentality, it's like now everywhere, you know. I think.
And that's played out. Um, I'm I'm, I'm going to use a trigger warning. the, um, one could look at the Minsk Accords that same way,
Yeah, yeah,
as a deceptive misrepresentation of actual intention.
well, I think they say it like Merkel, like a German chancellor or so, they were not intending to
Yep.
keep their promises, it's
Right.
just to,
And a former Spanish PM also
yeah,
said it. Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
just we need like some time
Yep.
to build. So yeah, it's like this mentality, it's like
Yeah. Part now. Now I'm going to take this in a little different direction,
yeah,
because I'm going to go into the ecological and resource,
mm-hmm,
and I'm going to make two suggestions. One, going back to the urban-rural divide that we were talking about,
mm-hmm,
the people, like you say, the educated, the people who know better for everybody, right?
mm-hmm.
We know better. This is how it's supposed to be. Listen to us.
Yeah.
They don't produce any of their own food. They don't produce any of their own materials that they rely upon. And they're telling the people that they're utterly dependent upon what to do.
Yeah.
And with and without the people that actually grow the food, I mean, I worked in factories for quite a few years as a maintenance electrician, a pipe fitter, a welder, doing maintenance work. I built machine tools. I
Mm-hmm,
was
mm-hmm.
in computer-aided manufacturing. Um, I've got this long blue collar, hands-on quasi-engineering background,
Mm-hmm.
and it just blows it's just mind-boggling to me how all these people who are uh, educated in soft subjects, even hard sciences, but are in the urban isolation
Mm-hmm.
and are just so ecologically uninformed and don't realize that they're dependent upon these people, like you say, in the country who are closer. They see the stars, they see the ground, they work, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's in factories, and and think that their philosophies and their heuristics are real and
Yeah.
and can sustain them when they can't. So that's one thing, and that the decision makers in government and business are similarly so abstracted from the biological and the human ground of reality. It's like, okay, I'm up in the top of a skyscraper and I look down and everybody looks like ants.
Yeah.
And so I can't take them seriously. I think, my stock market and my plans for the future are really accomplishable, but I've lost touch with resource. Every war, may have been dressed up in ideology, but it's really about resources
Yeah. Yeah.
and who controls resources, who has access to them, who doesn't, and whatever advantage that can confer in this game theory thing of mistrusting the other.
Yeah, yeah. Game theory, it's interesting. And you saying, yeah, it's like, uh, compared like to blue workers, like white collar, are more living in this abstract, like digital world, where it's like
Mm-hmm.
in a world of map. If we will use Alfred Korzybski, and
Right.
other see
Mm-hmm.
more like territory. That's okay. You can't click and something happens instantly in this digital world. And
Right.
I myself, like and some kind of like me, my peers, uh, like this kind of thinking that it's everything should be fast. Okay, you click and so on, delivered. Whereas like in reality, in territory, like a child need like 9 months, like crops need 2 6 months. It's like ecological process. Everything,
Yeah.
it's built up like from this potential, from seed,
Mm-hmm.
and this kind of thinking, like with you, as you said, like with map thinking. Okay, like they need to move that and that, and not seeing like actual people. It's similar like with what Nora talked about, cold data, right, and warm data, like seeing
Yeah.
only one, like some kind of metric, and completely ignore another, like relations, for example, what like she talked about, like refugees, right, how Microsoft, like okay, we need one data, like how many refugees like in Europe, and they don't know like all like their tastes and so on, like it's all this cold data.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and it's a. I've heard some people refer to it as like the Cartesian bind. It's like we've got this XYZ mental map that we think we can just drop a grid over any piece of geography and divide it up and think that that's um, lay coordinates on it. Now we can own it and farm it. And it's a it's such a foundational um, misconception
Yeah,
of the
yeah,
Western world. Yeah.
yeah, we don't see all these relations, and maybe some kind of companies like ignore it. Like in
Mhm.
Russia, they just okay, we will build it, and like future generations will deal with that. But now
Yeah.
we have profit, and
That's right. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
it's
And you know, the as far as I can tell, some of the biggest mistakes in my life seemed like a good idea at the time,
mm,
based on what I thought I knew and my experience and the circumstances as I understood them. Because most every major mistake I made, I thought I was solving some other problem.
mhm. Yeah, there's back to all this stuff now with elections in US, like with Trump. So what do you think will happen? More like I think America will be more like isolated, right? To deal with their own stuff, or how you see it.
Yeah, I think there's again, it is urban rural divide.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the idea that I'm smarter than you, so I've got I know what you should do and how you should be proceeding in your
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
And and the people that are actually doing things that support the whole system, like
Yeah.
um, growing food, making things, um, keeping the electric grid
Yeah.
operating,
Yeah. We are forgetting about it. Electric grid.
generating power, um,
Or
and
water, and how to say, like canalization.
sanitation, the water
Yeah.
treatment
Yeah.
facilities.
Yeah.
I mean, all these things that we think we throw a
Yeah.
switch and we
Yeah.
get light, and like there's it's just magic. We don't see the chain of custody
Yeah.
of our food. I mean, from the sea, how many hands touch the food that we get every day, and the but those of us that are on that beneficial end where things just show up at our request,
Yeah.
we take that for reality and project it out into the world incorrectly. But we seem to have more financial power to try and oppose our will, and so we end up um, with the map and the territory mismatching even more and more and more. And the people that are doing the stuff at Maslow's lower level of hierarchy,
Mhm.
the people at the top of the hierarchy, of think they understand it and are imposing universal solutions. You
Mhm.
know, because the more you abstract, the more you think you can have a universal principle. I mean, there are some. Maybe gravity is really a thing.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, but as far as human nature and ecology, there's very little. There's so much difference between one place from another ecologically
Mm-hmm.
that that coming up with really big top down solutions to complex problems, um, the people at the bottom really see the flaws in that approach because they know that, well, that doesn't really work here in this region of the planet, you know, but you're mandating things that that we know won't work, but nobody's listening. And so and my sense is that that's a huge. Um, I know lots of people who voted for Trump who don't like him as an individual, but they understand that he's a force of opposition to that top down universal
Mm-hmm.
imposition of system. Um, and they're not necessarily, um, a lot of them are really encouraged by the people he's brought in around him. You know, you talked about Robert Kennedy, you know, you talked about the Kennedys.
Yeah, yeah,
And,
Junior.
uh,
Yeah,
and so there are people that are really encouraged by what they think Trump has learned over the last 8 years.
yeah.
And the people he's brought in to play key roles in shaping a, um, a diminishment of the power of that intellectual uh, abstraction. And what that means is that there's a whole lot of people who see that an incredible amount of the world is being subjected to this sort of um, abstract regimentation of behavior and policy. And they a lot of people here look at the United States as like an outpost of free speech and um, choice and independence to try and oppose that more, you know, the global, you know, as they represent it, the globalist agenda of,
Yeah,
you know, eat bugs, you know, you won't own anything,
yeah,
you know, you'll never be happier, you know.
yeah.
Um, and so there's these, and I don't know if you've ever come across the idea of the fourth turning.
It's like about cycles.
Yeah,
I think
yeah, typically like 80-year cycles.
Kondratiev, I think, right?
The
Kondratiev cycles, right? I heard about it, but I don't know. I know that's like some Russian guy. Uh,
Well,
con-
there may be a Russian version. Um, it was developed
in
in
nine
the
in
80s.
in 1920, so like 100 year 104 years ago he developed it. Cycle.
Okay, so okay,
Yeah, it's about like 60 years. Yeah,
and in the
anyway.
U.S.
Yeah, anyway, so
In the U.S. it's been about 80 years,
mm,
and it's a fairly predictable. And the guys who wrote this book, you know, who were doing social research,
mm-hmm,
um, they were the ones in like the late 80s and early 90s when they were publishing this stuff. They actually started naming the generations. They were the ones that came up with, you know, like
boomers and
Generation
okay.
X, millennials, because of because of the lived experience of the childhood,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
based on the technological landscape and prevailing belief systems and educational models, that these children were then shaped into a different set of values, perceptions,
Mm-hmm.
experiences of the world. And they started it to try and help companies with having management problems where the management was one or two generations different from the people who were coming in, and the generation divide and the inability to communicate and understand each other was so great that they tried to find ways of communicating that so that that gap could be, so a business could manage the younger employees better and figure out what motivated them, what they needed in the
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
reward system, incentives, how to communicate. Um, but they noticed this larger pattern of things that that lines up pretty well with your. I mean, there's a couple of guys. One of them is Joseph Tainter,
Mm.
who his field of study has been the trajectory and the collapse of complex civilizations.
Mm. Interesting.
And going back, surveying lots of them. And there's this other guy called Peter Turchin, and his view is similar, although he focuses more on like the cusp of civilization. And one of his historical perspective is that when a civilization is reaching its peak,
Mm-hmm.
it has so much wealth that it produces too many overeducated people.
Mm-hmm.
And the term he, because more families are doing well and they want their kids to do well, so more people get more educated, and there's more people prepared for a limited number of meaningful leadership positions in the society.
Mm.
So there's more people thinking that that's their destiny, and the competition for those limited, meaningful administrative, managerial, political,
Mm-hmm.
leadership roles. Um, and he calls it the overproduction of elites.
Mm. So there's no spot for them. So we will build a new, right? Like a.
The system, because of the interest of the parents and the families of these young people, will actually shift the system to help create positions to accommodate them that are
Mm.
parasitic on the system.
Bullshit jobs, like
Bullshit job.
David Graeber.
Yeah, David Graeber. Yes, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And but they've been conditioned to think that they're entitled to some sort of influence
Mm-hmm.
and power and status,
Mm-hmm.
and and it's a sign of like the peak, and it contributes to the decline
Mm.
of a civilization in his historical research. And so some of what we're talking about, this level of abstraction and
Yeah.
this isolation, abstraction from the ground, that the systems that actually support um, complexity or complication. Let's differentiate complexity versus complication.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so a society that gets too well off and too successful ends up having too many people that are um, competing for their for preeminence.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up getting on LinkedIn just a little while ago, and it just struck me as absolute proof of concept of too many elites.
It's interesting how it's like fits. I am not familiar with this theory. I know like a Ray Dalio work, like he's like a collapse and so on, like
Hmm.
civilizations.
Right.
like Spain and Holland, Netherlands, like Spain, I
Hmm.
think UK and USA, and like China, like Ryzen. But
Yeah.
now we have like free of movement, so people, lots of people want to go to US. So like with
Hmm.
immigration and now like all this stuff with border,
Yeah.
like there are a lot of like hands to do like a blue stuff work, right? Blue collar work.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
these like over educated people, but basically now we have like YouTube, internet, all these social medias where they
Yeah.
can have some kind of authority, some kind of position. So we don't have like, well, we have like institutions, like official, right?
Hmm.
But I don't know, like some influencers, right? So they influence, kind of, they have like this position where they can how say it, use their like power and mind and so on. So maybe it's like it fills the spot. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? So, because
Yeah. Yeah. That's an example of it. Be, because again, like Graeber's idea of um, the more that's a unique situation civilizationally. Um, Previous civilizations that had followed the trajectory of growth and development and peaked and overreached and then declined, um, typically faster than they grew in every case.
Mhm.
Um, the um, this is unique in the amount of energy we have available and are consuming to support like what we're doing.
Yeah,
I mean, we're burning energy right now,
yeah.
and the influencers, but comparing one civilizational rise and trajectory with another, the overproduction elites more critically, historically, according to these guys, resulted in bloated bureaucracy,
Hmm. Yeah.
over bureaucratizing of everything, over management. They were levels of supervision and management and just making work for people that actually interfere with the flow of services and goods
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
an economy. Not saying that those are good, because every complex civilization trashes their environment,
Yeah.
but that set of organized that organization of living arrangements that does support a large population becomes drained by this over bureaucratizing and making thinking that you can make rules for everything.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, it's like
And
I are familiar with like lion fox like theory, that's there's like kind of lions that have like current power, and foxes, they want to like a position, they want this power, so they're like creating some kind of like their own niche, their own
mhm,
like position in order. Uh,
yeah,
so that's, yeah, maybe what's.
and, and they try and conspire and compete to undermine the power of the lion
Yeah,
to
yeah,
allow them to have ascendancy of some sort of power. Yeah.
y-
Yeah,
yeah.
and so it gets difficult for a institution to have a coherent execution, or to have a reasonably efficient execution of a shared purpose, because the shared purpose becomes undermined by the individual um, personal agendas of trying to rise in a hierarchy.
Yeah. It's interesting, like back to what you talked about regarding generations. And like recently I heard, Daniel Schmartenberger, I think
Mhm.
how to pronounce it.
Yeah.
uh, and he
Yeah,
talked
it's a
about
mouthful.
yeah, he talked about
His name's a mouthful. Yeah.
yeah, he talked about like a mimetic theory by René Girard. Have you heard about it? No?
No, no,
It's
I'm fascinated by memetics and how they
yeah,
constellate into worldviews and belief systems.
yeah. In my book club, like recently, like we are discussing Richard Dawkins,
Hmm.
right? So like creator of this terminology, like meme, you know. So
Hmm.
basically, he lays out as like these genes, like which like in a soup some kind of molecules which replicates itself, and it's happens they created by like this evolution process, completely
Hmm.
unconscious, right? Our brains, and like their hypothesis, it's a kind of this puddle like of mud where we created genes, there's like created memes, right, by
Hmm.
imitation. So it's like unit of imitation, a unit of
Hmm.
culture, like
Yep.
one meme, right? So everything like
Yep.
meme, even like words, it's memes. And from
Hmm.
what I understand, like from our childhood, right, we imitate like our parents, like parental figures. And so they basically laying out installing in us like kind of this
Right.
software, right? How to operate, what kind of memes. So meme of competition, for example, meme of something consumption, uh, and so on. And they differ slightly, but basically they are the same. Like these mental models, right? It's in language, it's different culture, but it's kind of the same. There was like yeah, Chinese with Lao Tzu, ancient times, different kind of process, not a goal oriented like Western, right, but more like a process oriented.
Hmm.
And it's interesting how like these memes, it he lays out that it's kind of the same like evolution, that there's like evolutionary stable strategies. Have you heard about like how to say, like pigeons and how I say, like it's a game theory, um, pigeons and like eagles, no, hawks, like hawks behavior and pigeon behavior. Pigeon, it's like all this turn other cheek, and hawks like um, you can mm, take other stuff and so on. How it's like in a population, it's getting stable. So
Hmm.
when pigeons, a lot of pigeons, like world peace, right? Everybody like, like communicating, everybody working with each other. By this model, it's a great strategy. But as soon as it happens, like somebody will have elements of behavior of hawks, like they will try to trick somebody, because
Hmm.
it's too great, the benefit,
Hmm.
because it's like for survival. It's like on based on genes working, and he says like on memes. So they're like a stable, stable situation, kind of. There's like some con artists, right, in each society, and kind of like usual like people.
Well, there's within, as far as I can tell, there's a whole wide range of behaviors and attitudes and perceptions and
Yeah,
perception methods that humans are endowed with or are capable of.
yeah,
And for some reasons, oftentimes the relationship between place, um, carrying capacity, or how many humans can be sustained in one place. Human population grows. When you're at the Dunbar number
Mm-hmm.
of a tribal situation, that visibility in the rural area that we talked about,
Yeah, yeah,
if you're living in a small group, everybody knows each other.
yeah.
And they've developed a way of moderating the emergence of those kinds of characteristics, typically,
Mm-hmm.
because they've had experience with that in the past, and they don't try and make 10 commandments and forbid anything
Mm-hmm.
necessarily. Because in my view, monotheism was like the biggest boost reductionism ever got,
Mm-hmm.
because you've got these 10 inviolate principle universals that can't apply. So there was monotheism brought about, the systemic double bind, because
Mm-hmm.
you're told this, but you can't do it in all situations, and so it's like, oh my gosh, the stakes are so high. But in a small group, or in a group of groups, where change takes place very, very slowly, and everybody spends a lot of time just interacting and socializing and coming up with rituals and ceremonies and ways of enriching their emotional and, you know relationships, and getting on each other's nerves.
Hmm.
um, that they develop ways of moderating, and in that kind of embedded, supportive, highly visible, nurturing setting, um, the hawk behavior doesn't have an opportunity to flourish much. And if it does, it's detected quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Quick
And it's
feedback.
and if somebody is too hawkish, they're gone.
Yeah.
Um, but when you get a larger population, in a civilization, quote, flourishes, um, there's more opportunity for deception.
Yeah. And there's, sometimes it's like error, and you can like the meaning of the message, it's according to the like who receives the message, he interprets like interpretation, right? So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it can be like error on the opposite side. They don't want like to trick you, but you're like okay, so you know,
Yeah,
so
miscommunication happens.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And so
yeah.
there's when it's like real like relations, not like some short interactions, you can there's like higher a threshold, in order to okay let it pass. For example, like this miscommunication.
Mm-hmm.
But when yeah, we're living like in civilization, lots of short kind of like
Right,
relations. Okay, there's okay, so you're enemy. But you said me that you're like for Trump. Okay, no, so again, and it's
right.
like all these labels, and it's yeah, it's interesting. Like, have you read like David Graeber's book called Debt? No,
No, I've not.
no.
Mm-mm.
Yeah,
No.
it's kind of interesting. Now I'm reading, and another one, Money. It's by Felix Martin, like on the
Mm.
nature of what it is. Basically, it's depth and how like
Mm.
it's now like interconnected with kind of two different like worlds, because before it was more like about uh, relations in tribe. The money
Mhm.
was like humane money, so it's like for a wedding, or when it was like a kind of another ritual, and now they're kind of like abstract, um, like dehumanize. There's like I mean, it's interesting reading, because he talks that our understanding, our perspective on money, it's like completely false. It's based on like this Adam Smith, John Locke, like their, and they build it upon like deductive reasoning, like some kind of
Yeah.
hypothesis. Okay, there
Yeah.
might be some like native Americans and they like have barter, but like
Mhm.
basically David Graeber, he is an anthropologist, right? And he's
Mhm.
saying that it's like
Yeah.
complete nonsense and based on like empirical, like real data from studying these tribes. No, they have like credit system. So for example, if like I am making boots, you making, I don't know, like some kind of potatoes, and
Mhm.
I'm just like mentioning in our tribe, oh, my boots now like kind of old or something, and you just like give it to me, and you can write it or not, or maybe and in some other time I will give you like potatoes. It's like it's from each according to their like needs, according to their abilities, like basic
Yeah.
communism in tribe.
We anthropologists have a habit of going to a location and spending a year or so um, to get research for their doctorate, and they think they think they understand what they're looking at
Hmm.
based on you know a short tenure. And the indigenous teachers that I've had have been very clear that in the setting that you're describing, or in traditional cultures, there's a who aren't literate. Their oral tradition, so their memories are really good.
Yeah.
And yeah, there is an internal kind of accounting that keeps track of this mutual indebtedness to each other. It's, they call it reciprocal exchange,
Yeah.
but my one teacher described it so well. He said that uh, people coming out, modern people who pretty much come out of, we can't underestimate the monotheistic influence on the modern world, uh, which is a very either or, unnuanced kind of, mental construct. But he said people of the modern world believe they're born in original sin,
Hmm.
that there's something wrong with them. He said tribal people are born in original debt.
Hmm.
He said because they know they're so dependent upon their ecosystem, their environment, that they know that they spent 9 months eating and they ran up a bill on the environment that they can never fully repay until they die and they go back into the system physically.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so their entire orientation to relationship and to the living world is one of indebtedness and gratitude
Hmm.
and mutual obligation.
Yeah, it's interesting how you know how you can quantify it, and he lays out it's in a book because it's like moral language, and now you have they built like economic language which you can each debt could be quantified. It could be quantitative in with digits, you know, how much you own to like to your ecosystem, or how much you own to your father, mother, and so on. And it's now it's like common like denominator, how you say it, you know, when you it's like you know, international system of measurements. It's like
Well, the metric,
yeah,
yeah,
metric, yeah. And but before
and
it was
imperial.
yeah, yeah. Before in Russia, it's same. We have like in order to like when you're doing some agriculture, like growing potatoes, you measure in like this lockets. In
Oh, okay, qubits kind of
yeah,
thing.
or
Yeah,
when you're
yeah,
how say
body measurements. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, when you're going something, it's arshin. It's like by your how is your feet, you know, like your step by steps.
Hmm.
So it's all everybody uses depending on context. Same
Hmm.
with you know depth, and but they even before like this French, which invented this like bureaucrats, this meters and so
Yeah,
on,
right. Yeah. Hmm.
money was invented. So like with money you can measure every depth, right? So how much like a person costs, like because before it was like life for life. He talks about like Africa and how like slavery was like kind of invented, and but after that you can like buy it by some kind of shillings, like this UK coins. And it's fascinating, this work.
Well, there was on slavery. There was a tendency in because small groups were subject to uh, genetic decline from
Hmm.
inbreeding, and some people have said that there was a long tradition of raiding other groups
Yeah, yeah,
and taking captives, bringing slaves or whatever,
yeah.
and that served an underlying evolutionary purpose of refreshing the gene, keeping the gene pool from getting too stagnant.
Hmm.
Now they couldn't articulate it,
Hmm.
they couldn't explain that was, but over time, for some reason, different. I mean, in North America, that was really common in the tribal uh,
Hmm.
practices. Would be, well, I mean, they were raiding and they taking horse, all this defending carrying capacity and interacting, enforcing boundaries with other tribes. But there was often capturing of other people, typically typically women, because the men weren't as easy to subdue and domesticate. And but typically you'd take somebody else's, you'd capture some women, and then they would become part of the breeding pool in one place, and it would keep the genetic vitality of a
Hmm.
group.
And interesting key point is he says in order to like to make slave, you need to take a him or her out of context of relations.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
when it's not like no family, friends, another tribe, okay,
Right.
so you okay, you can make slave.
Hmm.
And it's interesting how now, you know, like lots of people like in these big cities, they're like no relations, no friends, they have like work on only corporate job, some
Yeah.
kind of in office, so they're like very, you know, kind of how say like on the very shallow relations. So it's
Yeah.
not like a clan. There are no clans, no families,
No.
familia, and it's basically it's a definition like of slavery if it's
Yeah. Hmm.
taken off context. And
Yeah. Because I mean that's what the colonial practice. Primary tool of colonialism was to demean a culture, to remove the meaning from a culture by demonstrating technical superiority and by extent and destroying any elder wisdom system that okay, our god is better than your gods and we have the bullets to prove it. And and when a culture's meaning system is undermined, the shared meaning system is demonstrated to be ineffective or not functional anymore. Um, you have a populace that is lost.
yeah, and it's all based like on gun. He lays out that's like a French and a Madagascar, how they came
Hmm.
to them, and
Yeah.
okay, you need roads, you need electric power. You
Yeah.
need. They say no, we don't need. We like living a nice life. Like we have rituals and so on. Okay, then
Hmm.
they killed everybody who was like against it, build it.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, now
Yeah.
you're indebted to us. Please pay
Yep.
in
Oh
French
yeah. Oh yeah.
currency because we brought civilization and stuff.
Yeah. I know. It's yeah. I mean, that's what's so interesting about what's happening in the former French colonies in the sub-Saharan region. In throwing the French out, starting in Niger,
Mm-hmm.
cutting France off from their uranium supply.
Hmm.
Um, and when I went, the trips I made to Burkina Faso to work with the medicine people there um, earlier this century, uh, yeah, the currency is a French currency that's in like half a dozen countries that were
Hmm.
former French colonies, the CFA,
Hmm.
and so it's been very distressing for France because yeah, they threw the French out of Niger, and then the French tried to organize some of the countries they still had a lot of influence in to go in and change the government back to one favorable to France.
Hmm.
But then Burkina Faso and another country said, "No, we're going to help our Niger neighbor if you do that."
Hmm.
And so there's been an alliance, a further sort of decolonizing of the former French colonies of late, and France is really distressed over it. And uh, but they're ostensibly a military strongman in each of those countries, um, but they seem to have a fair amount of popular support.
Hmm. Hmm. It's yeah, it's really interesting how it's will change because it's the same like mode of operation, like mimetic structures inside how like you deal with it in French, and I think it's same in Niger, in like will be. It just like nothing
Hmm.
will change. It's will be
Right.
another dominating. For example, all these
Hmm.
riots in Europe and all the stuff that's happening in UK before, and it's just like actors change, but basic like structure, how like we are operating, it's kind of similar, and all
That's a point. That's a point I try and make to people who advocate for revolution and wrap a revolution in these wonderfully lofty um, values and ideals and such. Almost invariably, a revolution is far more punishing to the population
Yeah.
than the previous system because two things happen. The mimetic structure, the actual entrained way that life is conducted. If you're in a system that is highly exploitive, like a colonial legacy system, where basically there's a great deal of just low level corruption. In order to get anything done, you have to bribe somebody because they're not making enough money from their job. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's this whole black market of corruption that facilitates the exchange of goods and services of life. Okay, you have a revolution, a lot of people die, suddenly there's new people in charge, but tomorrow we still have to eat.
Yeah.
And so they haven't reformed the currency system. The currency's in the toilet. I mean, so the underlying methods of exchange, the person who was taking the bribe and the person who was given the bribe still have to do that kind of thing to accomplish what needs to be done. And it's the idealism of transforming a system is it's typically uh, not not really informed about how the the people lower on Maslow's hierarchy conduct their business.
Yeah. And you can change, you can't control system, you can only like maybe push it a little bit direct, it
Yeah.
depends on your, how say, like if you own like medium of exchange, for example, I
Hmm.
don't know, like Twitter or something, YouTube, you can, but you can't control it. It can,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Life. I mean, life. Actually, I mean, not to beat a Batesonian drum, but life kind of finds the way it's going to do it
mm-hmm.
under the constraints. Um, because my view of an ecology is a incredibly intricately interconnected network of constraints
Mm-hmm.
that keep populations and species in a fluid relational balance that's not fixed, but everybody is both feeding each other and eating each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
And to maintain and develop the dynamic system that supports the whole and constrains the whole. And humans hate limits. Somehow we think we're exempt from limitations, or should be. And we've done a great job of overcoming them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all, it's again mental models, and some say
Mhm.
that's okay, resources, and we have like asteroids and so on, moon, Mars, and
Oh, yeah.
all
Oh,
the
yeah.
way we go, so it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. Okay,
Doesn't matter.
we mine Earth, and then other. It's like, in this movie Avatar. Have you seen it?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I've seen both of them so far. And
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Came to this Pandora like to mine, and
Mhm.
it can be like forever and ever. And another group says no, like that's not possible, like let's degrowth, like limit our
Hmm.
population. All these people, I think from the 80s, that saying something like there's like gold billion only, and then like some kind of technology changed with I think with agriculture, and now
Hmm.
it can really like support like 8 billions and more, because technology changed, and in their model they
Hmm.
like couldn't predict it, like this change in technologies. So but like
Yeah.
what's the common ground, like to find, because it's
Hmm.
again like this opposition, like left right, um, and in this was like Luddites or Luddites. Uh,
Oh, yeah, the Luddites, yes, in England, yeah.
yeah, but basically how like this mental model, and this Unibomber, I think it's kind of
Hmm.
similar, and other like tech, for example,
Yeah,
leaders of them, and it's
yeah.
all
There's,
maps.
yeah, yeah. I mean, uh, have, have you come across a fellow named Simon Michaud?
I think no, Simon Michel. No, no.
He is
Like
an amazing individual to listen to.
from Switzerland?
Michaux.
Michel?
Yeah, Michaud. Yeah, it's a French name. Yeah,
Okay, okay,
Michaux. Yeah.
okay, okay.
Um, he's hilarious in sort of a dark humor way, but but, but he's been he comes out of the mining industry,
Hmm.
and he he has just done. I mean, he's done an amazing amount of research, calculation, um, and strategizing to try and preserve the benefits of civilization at a smaller scale.
Mm-hmm.
That's in um, he's combined a number of things where to have a manageable degree of manufacturing where every everything feeds the next process. You know, it's very much a circular, but it's actually it sounds pretty doable
Mm-hmm.
um, at kind of a small scale. But but one of the key components is as a small scale power source, or would be a small liquid salt thorium reactor
Hmm.
that could be distributed around. He says you can build one in a 40-foot. It takes up a 40-foot container.
Hmm.
The waste is only problematic for 300 years, so it's fairly easy in a stable culture to manage the small amount of waste that comes out of it because it consumes most of itself.
Hmm.
Um, but anyway, so he's fascinating to listen to because he really understands not only the economic implications of where we are um, as a global, interdependent, fragile
Yeah.
um, system, and but really understands the physics of it all,
Hmm.
as well as a lot of the community issues and the uh, human aspects.
Yeah.
Um, so it's an interesting offering. And as an engineer, I think you'd find it fascinating. Um,
Yeah, it's like
as an engineer philosopher, I think you'd find it fascinating.
yeah, it's my past life, like engineering degree. Yeah, more in now other stuff, but I'm still fascinating with that. With okay, Maka, I think we can wrap it up
I think
because
so. Yeah.
two
Yeah. This
hours.
has
I
been
think it's we can do it maybe again or something in PNP. Um,
more than happy to. Yeah.